I'm,
Okay.
oh, no,
Sorry.
go ahead. Let's go.
So my name is Shelly Stucchi, and I am here with my husband, Craig Stucchi, to share with everybody our story about how we created financial independence through investing in real estate and creating passive income. I grew up in Taiwan, and when I lived there, we were poor. It was during a time when the economic boom had not fully occurred, and I actually lived with my grandparents. My parents were here in the US working and saving all their money and sending me back while I stayed with my grandparents and my brother. So growing up, money was definitely something that was part of our culture, in the mindset that there was a lot of scarcity around it. Right now, I think I had 2 change of clothing. For the most part, we didn't have hot running water, and you save everything. Nothing was ever wasted, especially when it came to food. And I knew from a very young age that money was something that could really be powerful. Although I wasn't sure how to get it, I just knew that that was something I wanted. Fast forward a few decades later, I'm back from the US. They got my brother and I, and then we later moved to the US. And my parents grew up, when we moved to the US, they owned restaurants. And so we were in the small business owner mindset where you had to work very, very hard to make money. And so what my parents always told me was that the key to financial success was to go to school, do well in school, get a good job, get benefits, and that is the way to go. And to not work like them, small business owners, because that is a hard life to live, essentially. And so I prescribed to that. I went to school, I did my thing. Out of school, I got a good job, and I was on my way to climb the corporate ladder, because as I had indicated, when I was little, I always knew that money was important. And so the only thing I had to recognize was that in order to get that money, I had to get a job. However, as time went on, it was clear to me that working for a corporation whose goals and visions and leadership did not align with my own personal philosophy began to really eat away at me. In addition to the fact that I had started my own family and time was very scarce, and that 2 or 3 weeks of vacation a year was not enough for what I wanted with my family. Craig, I guess you could do your intro and then we'll talk about the passive income.
Yeah, so although Shelly and I have really different upbringings, she was born in Taiwan, I was born here. We share a lot of the same philosophy about money and had a lot of the same principles instilled with us from a young age as we grew up. So I grew up here in the U.S. and just your traditional middle class suburban family. And my father is a PhD. He went to school for a very long time. I still have active memory of him studying for his PhD boards and all those types of things. But and what that really translated to from a money perspective was that money was scarce. When you're in an academic profession, you're really trading passion for your work and your career over over sort of a higher earning salary. So I had a very much money philosophy instilled in me that money is scarce and you can't afford things. And it was never really presented in a way to me that you could afford these things if you did certain things like work or anything like that. But that money was scarce, and we were always talking about not how to. The question was never how can I afford this, but I can't afford this, or we're not well off, we're not rich, we don't have these types of things. So very traditional, very scarce, scarcity money kind of upbringing. So fast forwarding, I graduated high school, very ambiguous, didn't really have a plan, not a lot of direction. I went to college because that was what you did. You graduated high school, you went to college, and I had trouble selecting a major. I was very directionless. I didn't really have a lot of drive or passion towards any particular industry. And, being a kid, you're not really, it's hard to say, it's hard to, when you're 18, it's really hard to say, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I struggled with that a lot. And I had very poor advisors along the way. And I graduated with a very ambiguous degree, political science. And coming out of school, I did exactly what you were supposed to do. I went to job fairs and I got a job at a large corporate company doing a customer service facing job, and it was a lot of hours, a lot of grinding, and a high degree of burnout. And it was my first real entry into the corporate world, but I didn't really know anything else. I prescribed to what we kind of learn as a kid. You get up, you go to work every day, you get a job, and you put money away and you save, and you just hope it's there when you're ready to retire. And it was really at a point where we started to develop a family and have kids, and we had our second daughter. I'll wake up one day and I'm ready to go back to work. It's only been 2 weeks. My wife is home, and our older daughter is there, and my little girl is there too. And I have to get up and go to work after 2 weeks of her being born, where it really just hit me, pretty square in the head, and said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to create a lifestyle where, family comes first, and we're not trading time for money. And that's where, we took the biggest step forward in our mindset shift toward creating a lifestyle that enabled that.
So the way we got into real estate actually started several years ago. It was maybe a year or so after the bottom of the real estate crash that there were a few condos within our area that was priced pretty low. I was lucky in that my parents had, although money was scarce and it was something that was very limited, I was lucky to have been brought up by parents who did understand the fundamental concept of money and investing it and making sure that the money worked for you, rather than always saving the money and putting it in your freezer under your pillowcase. And so with that, my parents had one or two real estate investment properties that they kind of just had on the side. And that was my first introduction, having grown up with that with my parents. So when the crash happened, we were lucky enough to be in a position where we were able to purchase two small condos in our area for a much lower price. And that was how we got started in real estate. At that time, I was definitely driving that bus because Craig, as he had explained, was had never been introduced to that world. And so what he didn't understand presented a lot of risk to him. But because the price was acceptable, we decided to move forward. And so we had that for a little bit until we realized that there could be additional opportunities. We then, fast forward several years, was when we started to read more books and really evolve our mindset to understand that money can be abundant and that money can be made in a lot of different ways besides just going to college and then getting a job. I think the book Rich Dad Poor Dad was very pivotal for a lot of people, but certainly for Craig and myself, in that the book was extremely simple, but it very simply articulated that concept that you don't have to work forever. And as long as you're prudent with your investment and that you understand the value of leveraging money and also other people's money and other people's time, that you can have an accelerant in creating additional income besides just your W-2 wage. So from there, that was in the late 2016, early 2017 timeframe. At that time, I was also pregnant with our second child. And Craig was going through, both Craig and I was going through a lot of uncertainty within our corporate jobs. My job specifically in my company, our division had actually decided to stop selling one of our products, which was the cash cow that floated the operations. The result of that was our division had laid off probably 60 to 70% of our workforce. I was not one of the people who was laid off, although I did see hundreds of my colleagues and friends get let go essentially overnight. And that was something that really forced us and was in sync with the mindset shift that we were already beginning. It was the realization that it's a major fallacy to think being with a corporate job provided you with quote unquote job security, because the reality is you have no job security when the decisions are out of your hands. Even if you're the CEO of a large corporation, chances are if you're publicly traded, you have shareholders to respond to as well as a board members. And so there's just ultimately no job security. For Craig, he was also going through something similar where his business was reorganizing because they wanted to be on the forefront of how work is done in technology and software development. And unfortunately, what their organization had decided to do at the time was an experiment which failed, because now we know 2 years down the road, they're backtracking on a lot of the decisions that they've made. But unfortunately, the human capital impact that they had made, where they also laid off a bunch of people, is going to probably negatively impact their organization for a long time. Meanwhile, during that period, Craig was under a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety because he wasn't sure, even though he was a top performer, he wasn't sure whether he would have a job waiting for him several months down the road. And so it was during that time of ambiguity that we took the leap of faith and we jumped. I remember Craig telling me at that time, when we were analyzing how much cash reserve we had set aside, that maybe we should not invest in real estate where the income we would be generating from those investments would exceed our liability and our debt services. And I said to him, it's because of all this ambiguity and it's because our second child was coming that we need to double down on this path, because we can't wait for our companies to do that for us. And what happens if they laid us off? Then if we had just saved all this money, the amount of money we would have as security would be finite, because when the wages stopped coming in, we only had this much money left. Whereas if we took that same amount of money and we allowed it to grow more and more and be able to adjust rent for inflation, for example, so that it kept up with inflation, then we are not stuck in a finite amount of money, but that investment can actually create additional money even if the wage stopped coming. And so it was because of that we decided to double down, and in 2017 was when we made several investment purchases, and the result of that has allowed us to be in a position today where we can the income associated with that can pay for our mortgage and our car payments and things of that. So now we have a lot less stress when it comes to the security of our corporate jobs because we don't need the income to put a roof over our head or, to provide food for our family. And that was done in just 1 year of determination and pushing ourselves to learn about the industry and getting proper mentoring and coaching. And it just goes to show that it's more simple than anyone thinks. It's just a matter of having the determination and the motivation to go and do it.
Yeah, Shelly, that's right. So, after all our companies had put us through and all this perceived job security that comes along with being an employee and having a job, being faced with, over a year of turnover and turmoil and having that job security turned away, it was still a very challenging thought process to take money that you think is safe and that's perceived as safe in a situation that you think is safe and deploy it in a different way. And, that's when we really took the opportunities and the resources we had available to us through books and getting mentors and coaches. It was really the kind of acquisition of really strong coaches that enabled us to kind of take a step back, kind of look down at our situation and kind of remove a lot of the emotionality out of it and really recognize that there is no perceived safety where we are. All the safety is there is it's an illusion of safety, and you have no control, and you need to trust yourself and trust in your own abilities and just recognize that there's a much different alternative path that you can walk down.
I think one of the best things about what has happened to us in the last 2 years is that it really was not a lot of time. This revelation that we've experienced, when you really think about it, who we were in 2015, 2016, we don't even recognize. And it's actually an incredibly freeing experience and refreshing, because we went from a feeling and a mindset of essentially feeling trapped and anxious to free. When you work for a company, you are always somewhat walking eggshells, and you're going to try, or you're somewhat drowning because there's something about it that may be unsatisfying for you, or that you just don't know for sure if you have that job security. So you're always going to be treading water, and at a certain point you start to get tired. And I think it wasn't until we took the control back away from the corporations that we now feel so liberated. It's an incredible feeling to be asked the question, what if you get laid off? And to be able to answer with, that would be the best thing ever. Whereas just 2 years ago, we would be like, oh my gosh, I don't know. What do? I have to update my resume. Who will hire me? I have to go in on the job search again. You're always trying to prove to others your worth, when in fact, our worth and our value is something that we need to recognize for ourselves. And once we did, we decided to put that to the test and get into an industry like real estate, which really is not as difficult as it's perceived, right? And it's just a matter of being able to switch on your mindset to trusting yourself and trusting your own abilities. And so that evolution for us really only took 18 months, with a lot of good books, a lot of good coaches, a lot of good networks, but it's just the most liberating thing. And so now we're starting to talk to a lot of our friends, our peers, you know, we're working with people, and we just love to share our journey with people because you know, when you find something so good and so refreshing, it's like holding your breath and finally getting that ability to exhale and then being able to catch a new, you know, fresh breath of air. It's incredible. And so being able to share that with people and helping people get there has been probably the most unexpected reward out of this entire journey. You know, we have a lot of friends, we work with a lot of people, and we see a lot of people who have that same gloom and doom of I'm going to work until I'm 70 or dead, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And to tell them and to work with them and to help them understand that actually there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not 40 years from now or 25 years from now or even 10 years from now. It could be 3 years from now or even 1 year from now. And that there's a very easy way to get there. So for us, it's just been very incredible and a blessing to be in the position that we're in, because we now have the luxury to not have to trade our time for money. And the way we got there was accidental. But we did have the motivation and the drive, and to be able to share that with others is really amazing.
Okay. I saw you breathe, so I figured you were stopped.
Yeah.
Let me pause.